What's going on, everybody? I wanted to put together this video to answer one of the questions I absolutely get asked the most. Anytime I'm on stage, somebody comes up to me afterwards and says, what did you create your presentation in and how did you make it look like that? Well, the reality is I create everything in Apple Keynote. I have for years. And you can do some really cool stuff with it. But the problem is, even though it's a pretty simple application to use, some of the more powerful features are either really hard to find or really hard to figure out. So I just wanted to share a few of those tips, tricks, sort of a masterclass in some of the things that I do to be able to make my decks look the way that they do, in the hopes that you can then use that information to make your work look, hopefully, a hell of a lot better. So let's start with the basics. Now, whenever you come into Keynote, you open a new blank presentation, this is what you're going to see. Left column is going to be sort of where your slides are. Middle is going to be the slide that you're on. And this sort of right-hand column here will just sort of give you the basic information. And whenever you click on different elements, you'll see that this changes. So you can adjust for like a piece of text, the style, the typography, and even the arrangement. And so again, I think some people don't even know that these three little tabs are here, but that's sort of the main interface. Now, this is not where the hidden power on this screen is. The hidden power is actually going to be for this bar that runs across the top up here. Because whenever you first launch the program, it's not going to look like this. It's going to look a hell of a lot simpler. Now, this is the piece that most people miss, because if you right-click on that toolbar and hit Customize, you're going to see this big flyout happen. And now there's going to be a lot of functionality in here that you probably had no idea was ever here. Things like the ability to adjust images, to do alpha masking, to be able to crop in on images, to copy and paste styles, all these different things. But so for me, the way I have mine set up is a play button, so I can actually play the presentation. Keynote Live, which is going to be the ability to then actually collaborate with other people on your deck. So that's what those two buttons are going to be. Shapes, typography, layering, grouping, the ability to then do superscript, subscript, the ability to then actually connect objects so that if you want to be able to tie two things together, think about doing a sitemap or something like that, you can easily do that. The ability to edit your master slides, think of this like your backgrounds, the ability to do guides, cropping, commenting. But the thing is that spend a little bit of time and just sort of play with this and figure out what are the features that you want to be able to use a lot. What are the things that are going to be valuable to you? Because a lot is hidden in here, and you can really set this up so that you can get a lot faster. And as a result, your work's going to be able to get a lot better because you're just going to be able to do things you had no idea this program could ever do. So to be able to create these more sophisticated animations and effects, there are really just going to be two ways that we're going to be able to do it. And the first one is going to be using transitions. And transitions, I think, are a lot more powerful. They can let you really quickly create a lot more sophisticated work than you might imagine. So let's just say we've got this black square. And for whatever reason in our presentation, we want to be able to get this black square from this side of the screen to that side of the screen. We want to be able to do that as an effect or to illustrate a point. Well, it's a lot simpler to do than I think a lot of people might imagine. Now, what you want to be able to do is to think about this like keyframe animation, where what we're going to do is be able to have two frames. So in this case, two slides. And on the first slide, dot is on the left. Next slide, dot is on the right. So start state, end state, simple enough. Then what you want to do is to go into this little diamond, double diamond looking thing that's transitions and go to add an effect. Now, whenever you do that, you're going to see a bunch of these are going to pop up. The one you're going to look for is Magic Move. And you can sort of already see as soon as I hit it, it shows me a preview of this dot moving from one side of the screen to the other. Now, you can use the duration to really control how quickly does it get there. So we can kind of make it go faster, slower, find the pace that feels about right. The other thing that you want to pay attention to are sort of these two boxes, which is going to be, okay, whenever I do this, if you know anything about animation, there's a concept called easing, which is really whenever a motion starts, it eases into the motion, and whenever it stops, it eases out. So in this case, you can see if you watch the dot, it'll sort of start slowly, get up to full speed, and then slow down as it gets to the other side. So that way it feels a little bit more natural. You can set it so that it will ease in, and then it'll sort of stop abruptly. So easy motion sort of feels like it hits something on the other side. ease out, which means it will start very abruptly and then slow down when it gets to the other side, so it feels like it was shot out of a gun or something, or none, where it just sort of will go the same speed the whole time, and it just sort of feels clumsier. So the thing I would tell you is just in general, set this to ease in and ease out. Now, the other thing that you can do sometimes if you want to do this is actually, when do you want the transition to start? Almost all the time you want it to be whenever I'm doing this, I click on, my clicker, I click on the screen, and then that's going to be the trigger to get it to move. There are sometimes, if you're doing multi-stage animations, you want to set this to automatic. So if I would want to sort of have this dot move to 3 places where it goes from one side to the other side and then ends up back in the middle, I can set this middle one to be on automatic so that we'll have this one. So in this case, I would click here. It would go over to this side of the screen, wait half a second, and then it'll come back to the middle automatically. So that just lets us be able to create a little bit more complicated animation if we want to. But there's a lot more that I think Magic Move has to offer that, again, a lot of people maybe don't know about. So let's add a second element. We'll do, I don't know what. Let's do a square. We'll make it, I don't know what, red. Ta-da, perfect. Okay, so there's also a few little problems that people can run into. Now, what will happen here is you'll see, again, this preview will still run exactly the same way. Great, the two of them move together. We can even, if we want to, mix it up, put them on opposite sides of the screen, do this transition again, and see, okay, cool, now they work together. But let's put them back together for just a second so I can show you where some people get tripped up. Because what you need to do is you need to make sure that both of these objects are the same in both frames. So in this case, these are 2 different objects in both frames. What happens is, if I group these in one and they're ungrouped in the other, and all of a sudden Magic Move is not going to understand what to do. So you'll see it doesn't animate anymore, it just sort of fades between the 2 of them. Simple to fix, go back in, make them both the same so they're ungrouped, animation works again. But the other thing that you can do there as well is if, in this case, it doesn't understand what something is, it can just fade it in. So in this case, we get rid of the dot. So in this case, what will happen, this black circle should move, and the red dot then will then fade in, which we see when we do that, it does. Because that's what it's actually doing, is it's saying, okay, look, I see the dot in both frames, I don't see the red little dot there, so I'm just going to fade that in. Again, you can turn that off, so if you just want the dot to kind of appear, but you'll see it kind of pops on right there. And then, again, we want it to be able to be a little bit simpler, we can do it like that. But the other thing is that you can use this to also create a bunch of interesting effects. So let's go back to looking at when these were kind of in different positions. So right now, you'll see they cross in front of each other, and that this red dot is in front the entire time. Well, what happens if I actually want to send that to the back? And now I'll try it again. You'll see that little bit of a difference where it looks like about halfway through the red dot sort of pops in front? Under the right circumstance, can be an interesting effect, but here again, this can be a problem. Because if these elements are bigger, or if they don't sort of look like they should interact that way, the thing that's going to happen is all of a sudden, halfway through that animation, one is suddenly just going to pop in front of the other one, and it looks really weird. So again, think about, again, keeping your objects the same, keep them on the same layers, simple enough. But the other thing we can do here is to be able to start to create, well, probably a little bit more sophisticated looking work. So we'll say, we like the red dot here. But here, maybe I want to have a line of text here. I don't want this red dot here, but I think it'd be really cool if it could kind of, I don't know what, maybe scale and fade in. So here again, you can do this with Magic Move. So make the red dot, make the red square bigger. So now you'll see it shrinks into place. But the trick I can do here is to go into opacity. Make opacity 0. Now whenever I do that, and again I do this preview again, the red square fades into place. So again, I can create a fairly nice animation with really very little work. But let's kind of keep pushing this a little bit further. So let's say that line of text I talked about. So line of text goes here. All right. So we have this line of text. And I want this to actually get out of the way because, again, whenever this moves over, I don't want it to be there anymore. Well, here again, I've got a few different options. One, I could be just simply be able to say, okay, well, it appears here. And in that second frame, I don't want to see it. So let's do the opacity trick. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, what sort of looks like maybe it wipes it. But you know what? I can still see a little bit of it there at the end. So you know what? I don't like that. Let's get rid of it. Let's do something different instead. Let's say, okay, I want actually to have that exit out of the bottom of the frame. So now you'll see that that text is just simply sitting down there, hidden from view. But whenever I animate it, the circle comes in, line of text goes out. Okay, that's starting to feel a little bit better. But now, how do I, maybe I want a line of text on this frame. What am I going to do there? So, okay, well, let's make a second line here, and just so it looks a little bit different. Maybe let's not do that. Let's just make it red. So, okay, red, yay. And make it right aligned. Cool. Okay, well, if I want this to be able to fly in, let's do the reverse. So let's take that line and let's hide it off the top of the screen. So now I'm going to have a lot going on. This circle will move over. The square that's hidden here is going to fade out. This line of text is going to go to the bottom, and this line that was up here is going to come in. So, like I said, this probably is, probably clumsier a little bit more than you'd ever want to do. But here again, just sort of really quickly, you can start to build up some really sophisticated looking animation. Now, let's actually look at the other way of doing this, which is actually to go through and to do the same sort of transitions, but it's going to be these, where you're going to see build in, actions, and build out. So let's get into that. Okay, so let's get into doing, again, probably even a little bit more sophisticated animation. And what's going to happen with this is that here again, this is going to be a little bit hidden. Because to be able to do sort of these animations, there's going to be this button down here in the corner called Build Order. And again, if you're in your transition screen, you'll find this at the bottom. Sometimes you may have to click on an object that's actually on the stage to be able to see it, but this is the button you're looking for. And this little thing hidden away down here in the corner is where you're going to find a ton of functionality. Because what happens is whenever you hit it, you're going to see this screen pop up. So this is an actual slide from one of the decks that I use that I thought would sort of be a good example to be able to show what I'm talking about. So this is a bar chart. And what I want to be able to do is have each of these animate in one at a time, because whenever I'm talking, I want people to be able to look at level 1, then level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, because I use motion to be able to control where people look. So if I put this all up on the screen at one time, people may not necessarily really understand the impact. I'm not going to have the time to talk over it. So again, I'm going to buy myself a little bit of time and make it look a little bit cooler by doing that. So this is what it actually looks like whenever it animates in. Now, what happened? There's a lot going on here, but what you can see is that inside of this build order window are all of these little animations. And so I'm going to explain that there's a few different things going on here that are how we do this. So again, watch it just kind of one more time. Each one will slide in, the number scales on, and then this little piece of type below it sort of compresses together. So it's up, big number, level compresses in. So it does that for every single one of these every time. Well, so here you can see the group that is here is the color in the back. 30 is the number, and level 1 is that level 1 that's there at the bottom. Now, this is going to be where it gets a little bit trickier. So for each one of these, for the group, what I can do is to come in here in transitions that if I don't have anything selected, so I'll just do that, then the transition is for this slide. But if I do have something selected, like this little piece of purple, then the transition becomes about what happens to this object. So in this case, what I want it to do is to be able to pick one that's called Move In. And that literally does just what it says. It slides it in from the bottom to the top. And so here again, I can control how long does it take, what direction does it come from. So if for some weird reason I want it to come from the top, I can do that and do different things like that. But I want it to come from the bottom, take 0.8 seconds. You can do bounce. I'm never a big fan of bounce because I think it looks cartoony in a lot of cases. So again, you can do bounce if you want, but that's the thing. So now I'm coming in, I'm going to select each one of these objects. So for every one of these colors, I want them all to be move in. So if I go to these things that are called group, you'll see they're all labeled move in. Now for the number, that's something where I want to use this transition called scale big. And that just means that it's big and faded out and gets small. This is really the exact same effect that we did with Magic Move in the last section, except here now I can control it. So you can see each number big to small. Simple enough. Then the last part is, okay, I want this level to be able to, I'm going to use this effect called compress, which is just takes the word and sort of fades it and squishes it in. So that's where I'm setting the motion here. So, okay, I now have the elements. I understand what I want those elements to do. Still more work to be able to be done here. Because for each one of these, you'll see that there is the option of when does it start. and you have two different options. Actually, there's sometimes you can have more than that. But in many cases, there are two that you're going to get most of the time, which is going to be either after transition or with the previous build. So you'll see when it says with build 1, there are these little numbers that run across the edge here that'll sort of tell you, but that's basically I want to do it with the last build. So in this case, I want this group, so again, the color to slide in. I want the number to happen, and I want the level to happen. And with both of these, I want them to happen at the same time. But you'll see, if I set this to 0, the number actually shows up before the color is there. So I can't read it. So that doesn't work. So I want this number to show up later. That's where this delay comes in. So if I set this to 0.4, well, actually we'll do 0.2 to show you that. So see now okay, well, it's a little bit better, but again, that number is probably still there a little bit too soon. So if I do 0.4, okay, I like that because now the color slides in and then that comes down. Again, if I make it too big, colors in, we're sort of waiting, that doesn't really work. So okay, 0.4 feels about right. But then the other thing I'm saying is like, okay, so this happens, 0.4 seconds later, the 30 happens. And in this case, I want the level to happen at the same time because that compress just takes a little bit longer as an effect. But here again, if I want to exaggerate that, I can do it. Color comes in, number, level, right? So that way it gives me a nice sort of staging of each one of those things. Well, then all I really do is just go through and repeat this. The one variable here is you'll see that the different groups are different durations because since these are different sizes, well, this big one here is going to take longer to come in than this little blue one here because it just doesn't need to travel as far. And if I make them all the same time, they feel very different. They feel like they're traveling at different speeds. So again, go in, adjust that timing, and you get that sort of nice, smooth feeling whenever each one of those come in. So these are going to come in one at a time after each other, and it's like, okay, I get that nice effect. But so again, it's going to be this combination of what is the animation, which is really this transition, what is the order that I'm going to have these in, and then again, how do I want these to happen? And so again, I can also stall one of these so that if I want to say, okay, I just want to be able to talk about this first level, I can change it to on click. So that instead of each one of these animating after each other, what's going to happen is that first one will happen and then it's going to wait. That's why you now see there's a break in this timeline. It's going to wait on that next effect. So that's why whenever you preview it, it just previews this one because it's saying, okay, well, I'm going to wait on that one to see what happens next. But so here again, what I actually want to be able to do, and you can do, and this starts to be like the super masterclass. I actually don't like after builds because you can see it creates a line there because the pause is too long. I think it waits a little bit too long to be able to do that because see, like it feels like there's a real pregnant pause between those two. For me, I actually like to do with. In this case, I'll set it back to 0.4. So again, like I can create the pause between those, but it's not that like, okay, get to the next one sort of feeling that you have with things. So again, this is the level of nuance and insanity that I can go into with these decks. Now, the other thing, if you really start to think about this, is that there's another trick that I've done here to be able to do this that in many cases probably nobody's going to see because each of these sort of slides in, gee, isn't that nice? Well, but the reality is if you think about it, is that these objects are sliding in from the bottom of the screen to this position. So why don't I see them in these white gaps that are here? Because normally what would happen is it would come in here and it would slide up into this space. Okay, well, you know what? Let's copy and paste this, and let's get rid of some of these other things so you can actually see what I did here. Because this is another sort of masterclass cheat so what actually is there's this, I don't know if you can sort of see that, right? So basically there's a transparent graphic that I put on top of this. So I designed this graphic the way that I wanted. I took a screenshot of it. I went in to Photoshop and actually knocked out these little pieces and set it on top of this because what happens is, here, let's do this again. If I don't do this, so I'm going to remove that white piece on top. Now you see what happens is now all of a sudden I can see these bubbles coming in and it just doesn't look nearly as nice. But now, so this one, the graphics back on top of there. Now whenever I do it, see how much cleaner and kind of sexier it looks where each of these sort of feel like they're appearing up out of the bottom. So this is one of those tricks that I do is in a lot of cases, I'll use these masking elements. I'm going to use this animation work and you never see it because even whenever I did that whole demo, you probably didn't even realize that was there. But it's one of these sort of little nuance pieces that whenever you do that, it makes a really big difference. Now, the other thing you can get into, and this sort of turns into the get these basics down and then start working on that, is the next thing we're going to talk about, is that for each of these, you can build something in, you can build something out, or you can do what's called an action. So let's talk about that next. Now, to be able to explain those different object transitions, let's go back to using a blank canvas. And so, how do we want to describe this? Let's go back to our friend, the circle. And let's do, you know what, actually, we don't even need to do that. Let's do this in one frame. We'll make it a little bit more challenging. Because what I want to be able to do is I want to say, okay, look, I want this circle to be black, but then at some point, I'm going to want it to flip over, and I'm going to want it to be yellow. So what you can do is here again, whenever you go into transitions, if nothing is selected, you're putting the transition on that slide again, because I know this can get a little bit confusing. But whenever I click on it, now you'll see I have the option to do build in, action, or build out. Now, the thing is that you'd really need to pay attention to which one of these is selected, because if you have the wrong one selected, you can go in, do a whole bunch of work, and realize that you're going to have to rip it all out and do it over, because whenever you wanted items to start building in, you may all of a sudden done it backwards and they're all building out. So again, this is one of those little things, but pay attention to it. Trust me, I've spent a few too many headaches doing this. But so we'll start by saying, okay, we have this object, and what we want it to be able to do is to just flip over. So now whenever I come in here, come down, and you'll see under this flip, spin, and scale, flip. Okay, so it does the preview, sort of flips over. Like I said before, hate bounce, take bounce off. So that just will build in and flip over. Okay, that'll look good. Now, the next thing I'm going to want it to do, though, is I'm going to want it to come in and be this black circle, but then at some point, I'm going to want to click the cursor and have it flip over. Maybe it reveals another graphic. Maybe it just changes color. So what we need to start by doing here is then saying, okay, now what I want it to be able to do is to build out. And you can see in the same object, whenever I'm on build in, is flip. Whenever I go to build out, there is nothing there. Because again, it can have multiple different states for each object. This is where it gets tricky. So now again, I want to come in and I want to put a build out flip on this. So again, still don't like the bounce, but you'll see what happens now is whenever I preview it, it actually flips over and disappears. Okay, so I like that. Now, let's go back into the build order, this secret little menu here that contains all the fun stuff that's here. Make that a little bit smaller so we can work. And what you'll see is now it says circle, circle. Whenever I click on this one, build in. Whenever I click on this one, build out. So now whenever I preview it, this is what I'm going to see, is it does that. That's because, for starters, whenever the way this is set up, whenever this slide comes in, it will remain blank because it's going to wait for me to click to trigger this animation. That's not what I want. Whenever I get on this slide, I want it to happen automatically. So now whenever I do after transition, whenever you get there, this is going to happen. Now, the next part is I do want this flip to be on click. So whenever I get here, flips over, black circle, and it's going to wait for me to be able to do something. Well, what I want it to do is then whenever I click it, the black one flips over. But now I want the yellow one to be able to flip in. So now I need to go to build in, come down here, be able to go to flip, get rid of the bounce once again. So now I have 3 different actions, and I know this is where it can start to get to be a little bit of a head scratcher. So again, this is the flip to bring the black circle in. This is the flip to bring the black circle out. This is the flip to bring the yellow circle in. So what I want to be able to do is to be able to have the black circle flip out and the yellow circle flip in happen at the same time. So see, whenever you watch this, one is fading out and one's fading in while they're both flipping. The thing is here, I have them in 2 separate spaces. Put them on top of each other, and all of a sudden, that circle changes color. So here again, this is how you can start to be able to create these effects. Is so that in this case, again, start with the black circle, and this is where it will get confusing. Because whenever you see this, and it looks like this, it's going to look wrong. Because you're not going to see that black circle. It's only whenever you actually play this animation that you're going to see what actually happens here. So white screen, black circle, flips in. And you know what? Actually, I'll do this as after. So it just plays it all at once. You can see this. Black circle flips in, circle flips over. So again, it doesn't look that way whenever it sits on the slide. And again, this is sort of where Keynote doesn't do us any favors. But then the other thing we can do here is that if we say, okay, well, at the end, we want this circle to go away. So this yellow circle only has a build in. So here again, put a build out, flip, get rid of the bounce. And you know what, we'll just do it top to bottom so it's a little bit different and make it to after so you can see this. So Black circle flips in, changes color, goes away. That's why I said it's just two simple shapes, but it's using this build order and these transitions in a little bit more of a sophisticated way of teaming these objects up together, where now all of a sudden you can start to create something that looks a lot more sophisticated. And what I would tell you to do is start with something that is just this simple, because you need to be able to figure out how to start to chain these different things together to be able to get the build in and build out to be able to work with each other to create this sort of effect. Now, the other one that's up there, which you're probably seeing, is that one that was in the middle called action. So now let's create another circle. Apparently you can explain everything in the universe with circles, make it hot pink because I'm feeling fancy. Actions. Now, actions are a whole different animal, because for me, build in and build out work really well as complements to each other. Actions tend to stand alone. Now, there are some of these that are going to be in here that you can use. They're just sort of, they can be fun or funny or simple things to use. Things like pulse. So you'll see that what happens is it actually creates this animation of it sort of wobbling back and forth. Now, here again, I can control how long this goes. So that felt a little bit too fast. So make it 3 seconds, feels a little bit better. I can control the number. So now it's only doing 2. So it's moving a lot slower there. The scale, how big is that going to get? If I increase the scale, now the motion gets a lot bigger. So imagine if you needed to animate a heart, if you wanted to be able to draw attention to something, this is what you can do, of being able to go in and, again, just sort of simply add these things. Blink, again, that's just, it sort of fades in and out with being able to do that. Bounce would be just what you would imagine. Actually, that feels a little too slow, so let's speed it up. There you go. And you see you even get a little bit of that squash and stretch in there, so it animates it a little bit, gives it a nice sort of life to it. Flip will, again, sort of do the coin spin. Jiggle we looked at. Pop will be where, again, it just sort of bounces once. And pulse was there again. Now, there are other ones that you can also do in here. Things like move, opacity, rotate, and scale. Move is one of the ones that I'll sort of use a lot, because now this is where, again, it gets a little bit tricky. Is whenever you pick move, now all of a sudden you're seeing two different things. Think about this the same way like we did with the magic move that we did before. So in this case, if I want to be able to go in and be able to have this move from one spot to another, okay, now I can replicate that. Okay, well, I can do that with magic move. Why do I really care? And the thing is, if you want to edit these, here again, the clues are not fantastic. It's this little red kind of diamond at the bottom is what you want to hit, and now you'll see the two states show up. What this is good for is doing much more complicated animations. So if I don't want one that's linear, if I want it to actually go through and to be able to start to do something like this, where it's a little bit more curved, we'll see now I can start to do a little bit more sophisticated animation with that kind of curve that's there. And be able to say, okay, well, you know what? I actually want this to be off screen. Now we have, again, something that feels a little bit more complicated, a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more interesting that happens there. And these are going to be what these sort of different moves are going to be able to give you. And here you can also stack actions together. So if I want to be able to also add in an opacity action, then I'm going to be able to do that as well. But like I said, you can be able to do those sort of things. The move is the one that I think, again, is the one that works the best. But the other reason why I just did that was to show you where you can also be able to have a problem. Because in this, what you're seeing is that there is this. So again, you can control this, and this is where they stack. So on this one, I have a move action and I have an opacity action. If I pick this and I pick move again, that is not where you go in to select it to be able to change it, because what's going to happen is you see now it's added this extra stage there. That's not what it is that you want. Go back in here, pick it at the top part of this, and then be able to go in and edit it, because if not, every time you do that, it's going to keep adding another segment on. It's a super big pain in the ass. But like I said, these are some of the fun nuances that happen inside of Keynote. But like I said, these are going to be a lot of these simple tricks that are sort of nested down in these menus. They're going to be able to let you do some much more interesting stuff than you probably ever knew you could really do inside of Keynote. I know that was a lot. And again, I went through a lot of things really quickly. So what I would encourage you to do is just take the time to go back and do those exercises that I did on your own, because there's going to be no substitute for learning, for going in and actually seeing how to do it yourself. And then sort of once you feel like you've got the basic concepts down, go back and pick a slide or two that you really like, that you think has some interesting elements from one of the decks that you use all the time. And go in and try to add the animations, add the transitions, add those different motions into it to just sort of figure out how can you make it a little bit more interesting. Like I said, there's a lot more of these that I can do. There's a lot more nuanced ones. Like I said, even just in a few of these, I think you started to see how crazy some of these can get. And if there's interest in these, if you guys want more of them, I'm happy to do, because I've spent years figuring out all these little tips and tricks to make my decks the way that they do. So go out, try those things, and hopefully your decks are going to get a lot better looking. And hey, as always, whenever you do it, stay crazy.